Good afternoon. I'm Randy Hall, Vice President of Research. Welcome. My position helps support the university in building research programs. And one particular area of interest of my office has been ensuring that we're at the forefront of creating technology, but also at the forefront of using technology in our scholarship. And that's a reason why we've had the Creativity and Collaboration Initiative. I thank Marty and Johanna for leading this over the last couple of years. I think we've had quite a lot of impact in terms of both how we look at technology and scholarship and how we've executed. If you have any interest in this talk, don't hesitate to contact me. We have programs where we've changed some of our tenure guidelines. We've created authorship and attribution. We have a site on Digital USC that was launched a few months ago where we have a collection of resources. Please go there for those resources. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Mitros. Thanks.
Well, I get the great honor of introducing Martha. And so in a world where the vendor voice tends to overshadow the way we think and we think about, respond, and acquire technology, Martha's MediaX group community provides theory, reflection, and a really balanced perspective. And Martha, I have a confession. I am a MediaX groupie. I read every MediaX message, and I lurk on the MediaX LinkedIn site. I have not yet been able to go to Stanford to go to a session, but I'm planning to, hopefully soon. The news and events are beyond cutting edge, and the conversations that they really incite are very provoking and also very stimulating. So if you're not familiar with MediaX, I'm sure Martha's going to tell you a little bit about it, but in a sentence from their website, MediaX connects businesses with Stanford's world-renowned faculty to study new ways for people and technology to intersect. So Martha Russell is Executive Director of MediaX and Senior Research Scholar at the Human Science and Technology Advanced Research Institute at Stanford University. She's also a fellow at the Institute for Innovation, Creativity, and Capital at the University of Tennessee at Austin. Dr. Russell is an organizational interface activist. An organizational interface activist. I like that. She specializes in technology transfer between academic and industrial researchers. She's established a collaborative research initiatives on technology leadership and information sciences for national science agencies and technology companies. She has also led interdisciplinary research groups at the University of Minnesota and the University of Texas in Austin. And she has consulted regionally and internationally on technology innovation for regional development. She also studies innovation ecosystems using data-driven visualization methods and system analysis. Her current research focuses on network analysis of inter-firm relationships to identify patterns in emerging business sectors, investor networks, and global business development. She also studies the pervasive impact of interactive and place-based media and is developing new metrics for new media, including social media and the emerging integration and device-centered media of personal area networks. I was fortunate enough to have lunch today with Martha, and you know, when you've been asked to introduce somebody, you always try to find something personal out about them. And she was holding her cards pretty close to her vest, but she did tell me that she plays the flute, and she has family members that are in the entertainment industry. So it's up to you to ask questions and find out who they are afterwards. So Martha, please come.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm not going to use a mic. I don't think I'll need it, but if you do, please signal me and I'll step over a little bit closer to it. Is it okay? Can you hear me all right? Oh, great. It's really a pleasure to come and see this beautiful campus. My first interaction with USC was a number of years ago when at the University of Minnesota we had a DARPA project that, now this was new, at one time, design for test. In other words, you would design your integrated circuits for the way that you would test them. And the way that this could be made accessible to students in electrical engineering and computer science was that their designs would be spent by the internet. There was no shopping on the internet yet in those days. To the Moses facility here at USC. It was compressed along with all of the other student integrated circuit designs into a wafer that was made, cut up, and the mail carried those wafers back to the students who had made the designs in time that in 1 quarter they could test the designs that they had made. But coming to this campus and seeing what a beautiful, beautiful campus you have, I'm very honored. I'm also absolutely blown away by the work that you have going on in your technology centers, in your media centers, in your journalism program, the Annenberg School. It's an extraordinary program. It's a wonderful resource, and I know that you all feel that fortune. But I want to emphasize to you that you have a richness among an intellectual richness with each other being associated with these programs that makes me envious. Nevertheless, I'm very happy to be here today and share with you some of the things that I'm doing, that we're doing at Stanford, and to get your feedback on them. I do play flute, and with chamber music, it strikes me that a jazz band is a very good metaphor for thinking about collaboration. Improvisation is part of what they do. You're never better than your worst player, right? Any of you who have played together with people know that. And you can't do it alone. You can play your own instrument and you can get very good, but you can't make music unless you have other people who also are good and have a sense of ensemble. The other rule that I'll leave you with, and just so that you know where I'm going, and we'll all be going for dinner, but is the 2 pizza rule. And in building research teams and collaboration teams, if you get them too large, they bog down with bureaucracy. And so out of the Silicon Valley ethos, there is kind of a 2 pizza rule. That if you're building a research team, if you've got people that are coming together to work together, and it's creative, and you're asking them to do things they've never done before, that you want a group that's no larger than a group that can have a meal on 2 pizzas. So in the time that we have today, I'd like to share some ideas with you about what I think the goal of collaboration actually is. Team and network are both important in this, and building on strengths is the way that I approach the teams that I'm working with. I'll talk about a couple of requirements for it. Certainly the permission to experiment is one very important requirement, and the belief that there's an upside is also very important. And I'll talk a little bit about what makes a mindset that's conducive to creative collaborations. So I believe that the goal of creative collaborations is to do something together that you couldn't do by yourself. Because it's hard to collaborate. You've got somebody else's wishes to take into consideration. And if you can do it by yourself, you can probably do it for less money and faster if you do it by yourself. The reason to work with somebody else is that there's something that you can do together that you couldn't do independently. And so keep that in mind. At MediaX, we're focused on the intersection of people and technology, and we know that there is a revolution coming. In human sciences, in information technologies, it will impact business, it will impact education, it will impact entertainment. And it's the questions at that interface that we're working on. The way that we operate as a membership organization is that our company members make a contribution to the center, and with the money that they give us, we take a question out to the university community, framed as a request for proposals, and invite faculty, student teams to do catalytic concept-proving projects to test a new idea. We're not building big labs. What we're doing is getting a question out there saying, this question has business relevance. If you have an approach to this question, and people know that if a question comes from Martha, that there's a market for it if they find a good solution. So one question that came to us, was saying, well, I'd like to have a metric that I can use to measure and improve the productivity of knowledge workers. Can you create that? I said, well, you know, it's like boiling the ocean. That's a really deep problem. That's a really broad scope. Let's break it down a little bit. So, working with a number of thought leaders, both in the university and at the company, we identified a couple of critical points that we felt were part of this area. One is the recent advances in being able to augment the brain, in being able to visualize what's in it, non-invasively, to see what's happening, to know that if somebody believes that they're interacting with a database, that activates one part of the cortex. If they believe that they're interacting with a human being on the other side of the screen, it activates another part of the cortex. Being able to store information, being able to augment human capability is an incredible resource, and we're starting to understand how to leverage that. Another very important imperative for businesses, universities, everywhere, is that we have to be creative. We want to be creative, we want to be innovative, and across every field there's a desire to get more creativity, get more innovation, and do it faster. One of the things that we do know is that creativity doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. And in our studies, we have found that while in Silicon Valley, for example, disruptive creativity is admired. You want something that's going to really replace the old with the new. In Eastern cultures, it's the kind of creativity that builds harmoniously on previous successes that is most revered as innovation. That's very different. Many of the teams that are working on creative assignments are global teams. And if you have team members who are coming from different perspectives on what creativity means, how does a manager help them work together? We also know from studies in our design research that all of the things that are set aside as a group moves toward a solution. Well, let's assume this. Let's say that this is the scenario. Well, that's too big. We'll leave that aside. That all of the leave-asides, all of the assumptions that are set aside, sometimes are not carried forward into the final product. And yet we know that the teams that are working on creative assignments that can keep those questions alive longer in their design process have better designs and they do better. And yet most of our processes are oriented to time and to end result in a way that don't allow that to continue. So we used to live in a world in which you placed your order. The parts were gathered, the item was made, it was delivered. That doesn't really exist so much anymore, especially in the context of media. People are creating, in many cases, the content that they are consuming. Orders are placed and paid for before they arrive, or they may arrive and there's another part that comes later. The reinvention of workflow, the reordering of workflow is a challenge in terms of worker productivity, and we wanted to include that in our thinking. Most of the real work gets done in teams. There is somehow the idea of the lone innovator, the creative genius who's making something, or the person who goes to the mountaintop and comes down with 10 commandments. But in reality, the real work is done by people working together. And that's hard. And so we want to understand that. There's a lot of technology that lets people in teams collaborate even though they are remote from each other. Those are important to acknowledge, but there are also some things that can only be learned by watching someone. It might be the skillful politician who brings together people who would otherwise leave a meeting in disagreement, but brings them together in a way that allows them to find common ground. Or it may be a successful salesperson who is able to understand needs and requirements and close the deal very quickly. There's a lot that can't be put in books, can't be put even on YouTube, that is knowledge and practice, and we want to respect that. And lastly, the agility of networks that characterizes the current business environment. I personally believe that probably the management skill of this century will be that of network orchestration. And so putting all of these themes together, in a request for proposal to the Stanford thought leaders, we invited proposals. Out of about 25 proposals, we selected 7. And they ranged greatly in terms of various aspects of this general theme of measuring and increasing the productivity of knowledge workers. For example, we had one that was looking at the way that information is presented in its granularity and in its sequence, and whether that leads individuals toward closure or toward discovery in the process. Very interesting work that was going on there. Looking at creativity and cross-cultural teams and how managers can help to inspire creativity and bridge the different mentalities of creativity across cultures. We had a project looking at metrics that could be used by team members to communicate to each other their availability and their progress on shared tasks. A project that looked at the enterprise level that said, in an assignment, there are people who are dependent on each other for information. They should be sharing information with each other, and by looking at the way that files are used and opened and read on an enterprise server, we can, we believe, establish some indicators of whether that team is going to deliver on time or whether they might need some intervention. We also had a project that put a game layer on top of a RNA folded, it's called folded technology, that is a machine learning algorithm to develop new molecular designs. And so we put a game layer on top of that and turned it loose with citizen scientists. Let them, have you played that?
I haven't, I'm afraid, but it's, I'm a game designer. It's very
Oh, okay. So what we did in this, which was very interesting, was we let the players on a weekly basis vote on their top designs, their top molecules, and then we tried them in the laboratory. And we fed those results back to them. And in 9 months, the citizen scientists were outperforming machine learning algorithms. So the game has escalated now to developing the approaches to design. And actually we're considering creating a new journal that will team credentialed scientists with citizen scientists to get those winning molecules out into the knowledge sphere so that they can be monetized. When this came across, people said to me, Martha, we don't do biotech. BDX is not biotech. I said, this is not biotech. This is crowdsourcing. This is citizen science. We need to understand it. And it has, in fact, generated some very good ideas in terms of being able to leverage non-credentialed people for technical information. And now another project that we did, I'm going the wrong way, was to take the information that comes from video game type activities about physical movements and to be able to identify in those physical movements to characterize social roles in that. This research has proven very successful, and now in a dyad we are able to detect who's the learner, who's the teacher, the expert, the novice, and to identify if that couple, if that dyad, needs assistance in the assignment that they're working toward. Ultimately, if the computer, the machine, the screen, sees that your team is having a problem and can intervene with additional information, that could be helpful to productivity. The last item in this was also kind of a wild card in a research portfolio, I would say, because this one focused at the individual level, at the calm and the focus that an individual worker would have in their work. You know, when you're doing email, trying to get through an assignment or get something ready for a class, there's a certain tension that builds up in working with that screen. And one of the things that has been noticed is that people's breathing patterns change in response to that tension. Now, it's difficult to say, you're tense, slow your heart rate down. But you can say, take a deep breath. And with a couple of deep breaths, your heart rate will follow. So this is a technology that is now going into test in a very interesting way with the medical community. It proved to be very successful, giving people feedback that would allow them to self-regulate their breathing and therefore regain their focus and return to the task. It's now going into test to see if there is an impact that it has on the telomeres that are responsible for aging. And believe that with calm, that the aging process takes place more slowly. It's pretty exciting work. Can't do it alone. You need a team, or at least a couple people. And creative collaboration has to be thought of as a team sport. You can't score if you get the ball. You know there are winners and losers. Everything doesn't win. The setups and the assists are a very important part of playing the game. And if you lose the ball, if you try to score and you don't score, the most important thing that you can do next is try to get the ball again and go for it again. And I think that metaphor works very much in creative research, especially in interdisciplinary collaborations. We are in Silicon Valley, and I think USC is in this environment too. Essentially a petri dish of creativity and innovation. Surrounding you, you have some of the most creative people in the world. We do in Silicon Valley as well. And in the heart of this environment, where things move very quickly, where people couple, go away from each other, recouple very quickly, the idea is to mirror that in the academic environment and to identify concept-proving research projects that will test great ideas, but we'll find a small part of that great idea that could potentially be its weak point. To test that, in order to, if it is the weak point, to discover it, to learn about it, and to change something that you're doing to make it stronger. And so the Media X approach is to work on very bold ideas, but tiny slices of bold ideas, and to iterate them very quickly. An entrepreneurial environment is very challenging for administrators. And I liken it to drinking from the fire hose. In a way, it's an addictive, it is addictive to, on a daily basis, hear transformative ideas time and time again. And the energy that comes from that is very powerful. And so it's like drinking from a fire hose, but I think it's like drinking fine, fine wine. And you don't want to miss a drop. The challenge, and I think most everyone would agree, that the diameter of the hose has increased greatly with the information environment. And we are in a flood. We are in a torrent of information coming at us on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And how to deal with that torrent of information in order to harness from it what we can use for our research, for our collaborations, is a challenge. I enjoy the innovation environment, and I have studied it as well as practiced in it for a number of years. lot of different perspectives one can take, theoretical perspectives that look at the industry life cycle, that look at resource capabilities, that look at value propositions, that look at industry or geographical segments, the business models, the legal structures, coalitions, value chains, social networks. And I'm always reminded of comments that Jack Kilby made when he came a number of years ago, it's no longer living, to give a seminar for me. And this was a big deal because we were able at that time to broadcast a seminar of a great person like Jack Kilby. He's in the Inventors Hall of Fame, discoverer of the co-inventor of the integrated circuit and handheld calculator and the thermocoupling device. To be able to broadcast a seminar like this out to the business community of, at that time, the Twin Cities. And so I asked him to come out and talk about creativity in engineering. And he's a big guy, he's 6'6". He was wearing a 10-gallon hat and high-heeled cowboy boots the day that he came to Minnesota. And I introduced him, and he took the podium, and he says, "Martha asked me to talk about creativity in engineering." Big guy, low voice. He says, "I have only this to say about that. There's only so much creativity an organization can tolerate. After that, it falls apart." Now, that was, a while ago, and organizations have changed since then. Their structures have flattened everywhere. There's a lot more outsourcing. But there's something that rings true in what he said. It strikes at the balance. We call them organizations. Why? Because they're organized. But I think that it's reasonable to look at new types of organization. The old organizations we used to portray like this. Pretty cleanly defined. The new organizations look more like this. Structured through relationships. And it's through those relationships that information, that talent, and that financial resources flow. And so my team, which we call the Innovation Ecosystems Network, has been studying a relationship capital view of innovation. We look at the relationship that a person has to a company, look at the relationship that the financing organization has to the company, and at the leadership level, map those relationships in order to get the patterns of an industry, of a geographical area. So I'll share with you a couple of patterns that our studies have shown. This one is the digital media ecosystem in Paris. And you'll see in red the members of an innovation organization called CAP Digital. It's a network-oriented organization trying to help French media companies become global media companies. In blue, you see people who are at the executive or founder levels. In green, you see the funding organizations. There are a couple of banks there, but for the most part, they are tried and true angels, or they may be investment funds. And what's very interesting to this is to see that for Paris, for the digital media sector in Paris, not everybody's trying to be an IPO. This group of companies, lifestyle companies, single office, no funding, no external funding that's reported. This group of companies has a branch office someplace. In many cases, a branch office is in Paris, the home office is in the region. This group of companies is international in their links. They are already connected to the rest of the world. This group of companies is the group of companies that has the potential, because they are already part of a network of resources, both financial resources and talent and information, to with some help from Cap Digital, which was the client here, to connect with the rest of the world and leverage the resources of the world. There's a similar type of study that we've done recently for the European Union's ICT network, ICT labs. You're familiar, no doubt, with the concept of a regional cluster. It's kind of an old concept that says there's a manufacturing chain that has to all be present in the region in order for that sector to really get some synergy and be competitive on a global basis. Well, Europe has, for a couple of fields, and information communication technology was the first of these fields, taken an approach to building a cluster of these clusters. So initially with 5 cities that were Helsinki, Stockholm, Paris, Eindhoven, and Berlin, linked together in a network of clusters, they began a focus of master's level programs that were focused on a new wave of entrepreneurial IT specialists. And the requirement is that you take 1 year in one location, you're obliged to work in a company that participates in this during the summer, and then you take another year in another location, another university, so that there is a mobility factor that's built into the students who are graduating. They added Trento recently, much smaller, but in character, an interesting element to the experiment. And this shows kind of ground zero when the program began, where the companies were, where the networks of relationships are, and we're following this over, it's probably a 14-year program set at a time to look at the innovation ecosystem. But we said, okay, we want to be global. What would it look like if we added the Bay Area as a 7th node? Suppose we could become a part of that. What would it look like? And it would look like this. In green, in blue, you see the strength of the individual connections, and in green, you see the strength of the investment connections that could be available by bringing in the ICT companies in the Bay Area. So, it's about the network. It's about the network. And it's about the network. We've done some studies about the alumni leadership networks and starting companies, and I'm sorry that I don't have you the pattern of USC to show you, but I can show you the profiles of a number of universities known for innovation and for entrepreneurial activities. Here's what MIT looks like. In the red you see alumni, and in the blue you see the companies that they have started. This is at the leadership level, so these are founders, these are people who are on the boards with each other. Berkeley's a larger school, and you see that it also has a lot of alumni who have started companies. And you also see some connections between the companies where people are serving on each other's boards. And I believe that this is a very important part of the shared vision of a new sector that emerges, or a new concept, a new way of doing business. Because when people provide funding to an organization, to a company, they kind of get in line with what's going to happen, how they believe the world, what they believe the world looks like, how they think things are going to unfold. When people on the boards of a company make plans and decisions for the future, they also talk about the future. They talk about the way that the world is seen. So there is a shared vision, I think, that is implied in the board roles that alumni have together. Harvard, you can see the strength of the business school, probably is reflected in the numbers of alumni from Harvard who have founded companies or are on the boards of companies. And Stanford also has an ethic, I would say, of starting companies, and an ethic of collaboration. It's unusual that a student coming into Stanford would be asked, where do you want to work when you graduate? But it's very likely that they would be asked, how are you going to change the world? What company are you going to start? So I would say that the expectations of the students as alumni are a very important part of this, but certainly the proximity to the venture community is an important part of that as well. A lot of spin-offs have come from Stanford, and we're kind of in a spin-off stage now with many companies being started. Key element is the belief in the upside potential. One of the countries that we've studied, and I don't have a picture to show, but I'll just say briefly, is Norway. Norway is a very wealthy country. They have the richness of the oil assets in the North Sea that allow them to, as a country, bank tons of money and assure that every Norwegian has a great quality of life. They also have some innovation funds. And quite frankly, they have a hard time getting people to innovate. It's not that they don't want to create something new, but they don't want to be seen as apart from the others. And if they get something going, they're looking for people like themselves to come and work there. And so they are very much kind of locked into a status quo. The belief in the upside is extremely important for an innovation environment. And it's very important to note that, especially in Silicon Valley, probably 2/3 of the engineers are not from the U.S. And the proportion of foreign people who come as students, stay, who are starting companies is very impressive. They have something to gain by participating. They have the willingness to risk. They have a belief in the upside. I don't know what your proportions are at USC, but I have been in universities where to consider that 20% of the faculty had an interest in consulting arrangements was considered bragging, something to brag about. I'm in a university now where it's kind of the reverse, and it's about 80% of the Stanford faculty do some of the consulting in that 1 day a week that most universities provide. That's a profound proportion, and it says that people are interested in the relevance, the impact of the academic work that they're doing. We also have, in a student body that's about 16,000 graduate and undergraduate, we have 11% of the students that are in a startup organization called StartX. And it was founded at the request of the students. They said, look, we want to have an accelerator. We've got ideas. We need some help getting them out. They met in the dorms for a couple of years, and then they went to the Stanford Student Enterprises, which is the group that approves T-shirts. They approve selling popcorn on campus, and they had to approve the students starting their own innovation accelerator. But it includes about 11% of the Stanford students, undergraduate and graduate, who in addition to doing their research, writing their papers, are also making business plans for the companies that they're going to start. Recently been studying the publish-on-demand sector and looking at the way that relationships are forming in that. This is a sea of startups that is emerging, and Stanford has put a couple in here. LA is one of these bright stars in this area. There are a lot of companies spinning out in LA. But what's particularly interesting is that while these are startups, this is the growth company sector. And you can see about a dozen venture firms that are heavying up their investments in the companies that will perhaps frame out the new publish-on-demand ecosystems. They range from digital media to software as a service, social media, mobile media, e-books. And if we look at the locations that are key, we see LA, London, New York, and San Francisco as central there. The acquisitions and mergers that are happening because of the information and the resources that are provided by Fisher, for example, and other of the investment firms that are very active in this network is interesting. And I think as we look toward how that's going to impact the establishment sector, we have something of an innovator's dilemma to look at. And in contrasting, for example, the approach that News Corp has taken to, like Google, acquiring the companies that might be competitive with them, to the approach that Holzbrook Macmillan has taken in creating a startup incubator whose job it is to invent the company that might replace them. There are different approaches to that, and so we're interested in looking at that. An important part of the mindset of creative collaboration and of innovation is that successful failures provide learning. It's not unusual in Silicon Valley to hear someone talking about the sixth company that they have started that they've been involved with in the past 4 years. Well, if you do the math, you can see that there's some churn there. But the credentials of having had the idea, of having tried it, of having tried it again, and having learned all the things that you learn by going through that process is considered very valuable. This is a new device. You may see it if you have an iPhone and are in the Apple Store. It's now available for Android phones, but it began in 2005 as a video archival and analysis project. It has made, and I won't describe it in detail now, but it's made 5 or 6 pivots in the pathway of that discovery before developed as a resource to take a 360-degree capture of classrooms in order to help new teachers get to be great teachers fast. The Gates Foundation said, we'll put them in 3,000 schools around the country. So they had to find some place that they could have it made, have 3,000 of them made. And while they were making this, somebody said, well, wouldn't it be cool if I could put that on my iPhone? And so the pathway is not linear. A lot of pivots in the way. This is a similar project. The Stanford Intellectual Property Exchange actually began as in response to one of our corporate members saying, it looks like the people who are using the internet want to participate. Looks like they want to contribute some content. What should we be thinking about? And one of the projects was looking at the legal issues in which they said what we really need is an intellectual property exchange where people who are creating content are able, even in microtransactions, to monetize that. So this has now spun out. It's a 7-year cycle from starting a new research project to getting a new course, to getting research findings, to getting a PhD who takes that knowledge into the world. And in that time cycle, renewing the question, renewing the collaborators, renewing the objectives becomes very important. The motivation of interdisciplinary teams is always great right at the beginning. It's a little bit like buying a hat. The best fun you have with it is when you're in the store and you're putting it on. By the time you bought it and you have to figure out how to carry it where you're going, transport it. But the motivation of, okay, we've got some new money. Who's going to apply? Ideas are great. The proposal goes in, and then, okay, now I've got to deal with these people. And how to get people to collaborate. Okay, now we have to get together. We've got a report that's due. It's our mid-project milestone report, and the leadership for coming together becomes a great challenge. The identity of the group and who's leading at what stage and at what point in time has been studied by a number of people, including myself. But the team dynamics and the ability of the players to take a solo in, play rhythm for a while, and then maybe be quiet for a while somebody else takes a solo, is a very important part of the cycle. You need someone new to come in from time to time because, rule of thumb, 16 months, plus or minus, people know what each other are going to say. It's hard to get some new ideas going. So, 5 rules, at least in Silicon Valley, for successful failure are, first of all, iterate quickly. If it doesn't work, notice it right away, as soon as you can, and change something. You have to take the responsibility yourself. You cannot blame anyone. You have to take the responsibility for what has happened. But share what you've learned. I did this and it didn't work, and here's why, and here's what I learned. And that transforms failure into learning, which is appreciated and coveted. 4th, start immediately. Again, right away. Get out on the field and get another ball to play. And 5th, don't do it alone. You have to know and cultivate and orchestrate your network. So 2 pizzas. Keep the group small. A jazz band. Build on strengths. Get strong players. And take turns. Because it's in that I think shared vision evolves. And although there are a number of events that can happen, whether it's a seminar like today or other get-togethers that you have, the impact of those over time is in new coalitions that form is really what forecasts the shared vision, which I believe is responsible for the transformation. And in understanding your network, in cultivating your network, in orchestrating your network, there is a transformation that's possible through shared vision that is really yours to develop and run with. And what I would ask of you is, because I'm so impressed with the programs that I've heard about today, what is it that we can do together that neither of us can do alone? And I would love to talk with you about that. Thank you. Sure, I could.
Yeah.
I'd also like to make an invitation on January 8th to come up to Stanford and participate in our 2013 conference. It'll be a great day. You will hear some fantastic presentations about research that's being done at the intersection of people and technology.
You're planning 900 years in advance.
Yeah.
We'll do our best to make it.
That's by trill finger. Somehow it slipped from the 0 to the 9. Yes.
A lot of these steps that you talk about are very much related to a lot of this issue of new leadership. This is more advanced leadership. So I'm just curious how much of this is studied with these ideas of leadership. Because he talks about the difference between leaders as in like just becoming a leader and being a great leader as opposed to just being a leader. And a lot of them, for example, taking personal responsibility, sharing what you learn, iterate, and using different terminology. It's pretty much the same principle. So I was just wondering if there was any common.
Well, I like the validation.
Okay.
But I think that there's something true in that. And, do you want to wait for the great leadership? I think that if you're trying to get things going, I would encourage leadership at every level. Let it happen small. Let it happen often. And take down the barriers so that the great leaders can emerge. But, it's really important to have a lot of experiences to share, who are confident enough in their own persons that they're willing to talk about others. Because there's so much to do with families.
It seems that what you just said is actually really critical in terms of people being confident enough to talk about their own failures. It seems that that ends up being a darn hard thing for most people to do. So how do you deal with that? Because in lieu of that, it's hard to make all of these other incredibly important scenarios happen.
Well, I think it's cultural. It's even, if you think it's hard here, it's even harder in Japan. So I think it is relative, but I think that if you are associating, if your network includes people that appreciate the journey that you're on, then I think that you at least have some people that you can talk about the failures with. If your network includes people who are willing to learn from you, and I think in general, for all of us, we're doing some things better than other people. And for all of us, there are other people who do what we want to do better than we do. And so being in the middle of that with your network and able to both share what you've learned, admit your learnings, and be ready for feedback, I think that well, it does take courage. I won't say that it doesn't take courage.
I have an answer to that kind of as well.
Help me out here.
No, I was just going to say, the more people work together, the more likely they are to feel comfortable discussing openly, what their shortcomings were in the project for whatever it was cross-disciplinarily. So if there's it seems to be that way on social media. People, the more they communicate with their friend group, the more people are to be compassionate to them when they reach out. I think that's kind of like the human nature thing that'll occur. Like the closer people work together. I think that a lot of people tend to now feel that they need to do things themselves, and they feel like if we do this ourselves, then we'll exceed or succeed. As like some kind of there's this thing that says like if you study this discipline, if you do this one thing, then you can build yourself into something. But I think as people realize that they can work together more, then they'll build themselves up to realize that their network is where the power is, and that will give them strength and confidence.
Some people
Even through failure.
do feel
Yeah.
a permission to try again. And that can come from a lot of places. It can come from your environment, it can come from your boss, it can come from your mother. But it's inside you. And if you're saying to yourself, gosh, that's a screw up. And at the same time you say, well, I have another idea of how to approach that. And I'm going to get started on that right away. You can give yourself that permission to fail and to try again, even if the people around you don't think that too. But it's special that you feel that way.
First of all, thank you for what you're doing. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm from the school of music. I got on my television, so I appreciate what you were saying about the whole improvisation and listening and deferring and all of that. I came today because I'm interested in from my own department. Musicians tend to collaborate within their own, within the arts. Like those dancers, the spoken word artists, visualists, but not so much in the other areas. And I want to ask if you could offer some recommendations as to how one might venture out beyond the comfort zone of our own artistic genres into perhaps whether it be the Annenberg School of Communication, whether it be the engineering school, whether it be the computer science. How might one go about fostering those kind of relationships to at least begin the conversation of how can we collaborate on a project?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think it's complex. I come back to what is it that we want to do, and why is it that we can only do it together? Because if there's something in music or in communication that can be done without it, then pass it up with the other people. Why not do it alone? It's going to be faster, it's going to be cheaper. But if there's something that you can do together that you couldn't do otherwise, then it's worth figuring out how do I write for my journals and you write for your journals so that we both have the credit for what we do. it's worth figuring out, okay, these are the students that we're going to employ, and they're going to be on PAs in your department. They're going to be on, these are going to be in my department, or what that will be. It's not easy to collaborate. Then you've got the administrative people who are saying, well, what budget is this? And what, how do you transfer in if you're old again? So it's only worth it if you've got a really good question.
I have a way of answering some of this because, again, I'm fortunate because Lauren is one of my mentors. And in regards to some of this issue of how difficult it is to collaborate because we have to be able to acknowledge our faults, it boils down to very simply we have to remain humble. And it's one of the problems in academia because we're given so much authority and we have to constantly remember that we're human. That's one issue. So, and there's also the design profession, which we're given this sort of design god status where we are not. So it's a constant level of being humility, and there's a Buddhist almost approach. In regards to the second question, in regards to what Lauren says in his books as well, curiosity. Very simply, if you want to do something, like you were saying, a project, you do it because you want to do it. You are curious about something and you want to know, and so you know nothing, you go into it and you want to learn. And you'd be surprised by how many faculty want to learn about the field. And it's just simple curiosity and simple humility, I think, is one of the things that allows us to do amazing things.
I think you have a strong champion at your university who's been working on ways to, from an academic standpoint, an academic policy standpoint, make it easier for people who come from different fields, who publish in different journals, whose standards might be different, to feel a sense of acceptance of what they're doing in collaboration. I can't tell you how important that is. You're very lucky. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think part of it is the legacy of academic institutions and the way in which promotion takes place and the silos in which we all live. And that's part of the legacy, particularly of the generation of people, let's say, who are at least 50 plus or something of that order. And maybe it's different at Stanford, or perhaps it's different at USC. I spent a lot of time in a state institution in Texas, and we had the idea of trying to stimulate and reward faculty for interdisciplinary work. And I think that helps facilitate it. And so our college, which is the College of Communication, launched an effort with the very, very large College of Fine Arts, which includes the School of Music. This is a big school, 57,000 students. And some stuff is beginning to happen, but I'm also reminded of an article that just appeared this week about, and you came close when you had that slide about the brain. These people are taking EEGs and constructing new symphonies, and actually have the scores that they're able to transform the electroencephalogram into musical notes, and it's easily accessed now. And it's just fascinating to see that this is music, and it's being made in some electrophysiological fashion, which I found fascinating.
The premise of your talk is to do something together that neither could be done independently, right? How do you allow for the times when you have two things that really aren't related? So maybe to your question, like the clock and the radio, and they put them together in the clock radios. And my background is design, and there's something called Sigma, where you make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. So in your model, is there room for things that aren't at all related, but somehow through happenstance or
That's very much a part of the model that MediaX uses to inspire new ideas that will come forward in the proposals. And I think that the intellectual leadership of identifying some of the possible spaces that could come together, and with some suggestions, suggesting possible ways that they can come together, it has proven for us to ignite people's imaginations. And we've gotten, some, I I generally know that I'm going to get some proposals, and kind of what they are, or else I wouldn't be out there on behalf of the members of the media. But there are always some wild cards that are such great surprises that would only happen if you establish a large frame and inspire people to think creatively inside it. And I think that inspire is a really good word to associate with interdisciplinary activity. I don't like the word manage with it. I think that's interdisciplinary management is really an oxymoron. But inspire, enable, I think work, because it's something that comes from people's souls and their curiosity, their desire to do something different than they've ever done before and to make a difference. That's a really good thing, both for professors, but also for students to see and feel.
Two questions. The first is whether or not in your interactions you have opportunities to sort of listen to your external partners and sort of get a sense of what they are looking for when they hire or when they promote people. So then that feeds back into what you teach, and whether that's been an informal process or whether you've done a study to try to get a sense of what external partners want. The second piece would be a explicit possibility of partnership. You had maps, various kinds of network maps. I wonder what a map of links between universities and firms in Southern California and universities and firms in Northern California would look like.
We could do that. That'd be fun to see.
One of the things that we're seeing down here, and I suspect you're seeing there, is that the talent content people at this end are saying we want to know more about what's happening in the sort of hard technology and some of the software stuff up there. In a couple of conversations I've had up there, the folks who do networks and pipes are saying we need to know more about the content down there. And so I suspect if one started a mapping exercise now, this is very early in that process. And that my hunch will be over the next 3 or 4 years, you'll see interesting patterns emerge, especially if you started now and did that.
Let's do that. I like that.
Just get NSF to fund it. This guy will fund it.
We need a little bit of money. It's not as much as we'll need if we try to come up with
As it pertains to your question, what does maybe I missed it. Sorry for coming in late. What does Media X do to inspire creativity? I mean, for inspiration in general. I mean, do they have activities, or is there some kind of way people can? I mean, obviously going to the coffee shop or something is one way to do it, but I mean, is there actually some kind of formal framework for it?
Yes, there is, and I didn't talk a lot about that, so I'm glad you asked the question. It is aligning on the question. Students are writing papers on them, dissertations. It's all done in an open manner. At the end, we expect for that information to be published in open journals. At the same time, the companies that have helped us, that have participated in practicing the question, know the proposal statements. They know the intellectual journeys, the research pathways that have been identified. And they have insight on those questions and on that research before it's ever published. So they have a 3-year time advantage. Because, when you write a paper, you are writing the linear pathway between the hypothesis and the results. All the things that happen along the way that you say, that's not the right way to do it. We're going to change our plan. We don't quite have the question right. We're going to change it just a little. There's a lot of really important learning in that. So the dialogue along the way while the research is in process is a very important part. And we get people together with conferences and workshops, and even before 2913, have a great meeting. They would be very welcome.
How often do those happen? Like for those sessions?
it's about annually for large meetings. In February, we'll have a meeting that is oriented around experience design, how that happens. In March, April, we'll have one that is looking at the delta, how investments in media companies have changed in the past year. So we have them periodically, and they are at the request of our members. Probably one quarter in a year, we have a weekly seminar series.
Should we take two more questions and then continue the conversation over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question. Since this is, your talk in large part is all about the network, my question was in terms of the longevity of the organization itself within the network and the individuals within the network. If you've done any research or thought along those lines in terms of really kind of articulating what's the optimum, say the optimum point for an organization to exist or for an individual to be within that organization, recognizing that there's different types of organizations and different levels and so forth.
It's a really good question, and I think for a catalyst organization, you have to reinvent yourself all the time. It's not, we're not doing the same research projects now that we were 10 years ago when we began. And so reinventing the process and reinventing the focus, and in fact new members and new participants is part of what allows, as a catalyst organization, the catalytic function to play a role. Now, in other programs that I've been a part of, and one of these was in Minnesota, focused on microelectronic and information sciences, they took a different approach. The assignment was not so much a catalyst organization as it was a jumpstart organization, and the desire was to bring in new faculty members, build new labs, get new courses, new research programs, and attract students who would, in 7 years, be available for the industrial community in their scientific activities. And so we went about that in a slightly different way. Now, some of those initiatives spun off into daughter centers that became science and technology centers or engineering research centers, and that's a different model. So I think it really depends on what the objective for the organization is. But for MediaX, it's a catalyst.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes.
It seems to me that so much of what you're talking about, which is so important and fundamental, requires the conundrum of the necessity to militate towards discomfort. The idea that the reason cultures don't talk to each other is it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk to someone in a different culture, to break down silos. And I'm wondering, how does one do that? Besides making strong, confident characters, which maybe mommy does that, and that helps. I have a mommy like that, and it makes my life as a creator a lot better. But in terms of making the idea of going to a place of discomfort, because that's where we're going to cover something new. I'm wondering, does that get particular shrift?
Yeah, it does. But I think you've got to believe in the upside. Otherwise, it's just discomfort. You've got to believe that there's something good that's going to come out of it. And that something good might be that it's always, and this is part of the culture, I think, of Silicon Valley, that you go very quickly to the heart of your matter. There's very little small talk that takes place. And so it's right away, here's what I'm doing, and here's what I need to go take the next step. And it's right away, here's what I'm doing, and here's what I need to take the next step. And we have a match or not, and speed dating, and you move on if we don't. And if you do, then you say, okay, what can we do together? And I think that off campus, the access to people who can provide a service role to research allows people inside the university to be truly collaborating, where neither is in a service role to the other. This was a problem for computer science for many years, that they felt that they only got asked to collaborate when somebody wanted to have some code written or have something done. And that wasn't much fun for them. But to bring to build a legal informatics team in which the computational science is as important as the legal part of the equation makes that quite a different collaboration.
I I suspect that a number of people here today had not heard about Media X, and it's shocking, but they may not have heard about you. So I would like everyone to join me in thanking you for the chance to become your fan. So we're going to continue the conversation with some calories over there.